What if a broken water pump led to a broken heart being mended? What if a simple act of kindness in a forgotten vineyard unraveled a secret so deep it could change not just one life, but an entire town? This is the story of a poor mechanic, a runaway heiress, and the land that brought them together when everything else had fallen apart. Before we begin, if you're someone who believes in second chances, quiet love, and the beauty of slow healing, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you won't miss more stories just like this one, where kindness becomes destiny and the smallest actions ripple the farthest. Now sit back, take a deep breath, and let me tell you the story of the woman behind the fence. A poor mechanic helped a girl with a broken pump. He had no clue she owned 3,000 acres of vineyards. The call came just before noon, when the California sun was already turning the tin roof of Tyler Kane's garage into a skillet. He wiped his hands on a rag, his palms slick with sweat and motor oil, and squinted at the unknown number flashing on his phone. "Tyler Kane?" a woman's voice asked. It was soft but clipped, like someone not used to asking for help. "Speaking," he said, tossing the rag over his shoulder. "I was told you handle mechanical repairs. Irrigation systems? Used to work those rigs up in Sonoma. Haven't seen one in a while, but sure. Depends what you got." A pause. "It's an old pump, at a vineyard outside of town. I think it's dead. I'm not sure. It's not working, and I'm on my own." Tyler scratched the back of his neck. There was something off about the voice, not the accent, which was neutral, but the hesitance, like she didn't belong to the land she was calling from. "I can swing by around 2. What's the address?" Another pause, then 331 Fremont Road. "The place doesn't look like much. There's an old gate. I haven't had a chance to fix it yet." "Don't worry, ma'am. Most things can be fixed." The drive to Fremont Road was one Tyler hadn't taken in years. It twisted through low golden hills and out past the last convenience store, where cell service flickered and died. He remembered the land vaguely, once part of a sprawling vineyard estate that locals said had gone dormant after the matriarch passed and the heirs lost interest. When he reached the address, he half expected no one to be there. But the creaky gate stood ajar, and just beyond it, under a row of wild fig trees, was a weather-beaten farmhouse. A rust-colored pickup truck sat crookedly in the dirt, and beside it, a woman was wrestling with a stubborn garden hose, her back to him. She turned when he stepped out of his truck, and for a moment, he just stared. She wasn't what he expected, not the usual retired farmer's wife or overwhelmed young tenant. She looked early 30s perhaps, faded jeans, work boots, a t-shirt damp with sweat at the collar. Her dark blonde hair was pulled into a loose bun under a wide-brimmed straw hat. But what stopped him were her eyes, sharp, watchful, and, beneath the polite smile, tired. "Tyler Kane?" she asked, stepping forward and extending a hand. "I'm Sophie." He shook it. Her grip was stronger than expected. "Pump's out back," she said, leading the way around the house. "I think it's older than I am." "I've met a few like that," he said, half smiling. She didn't laugh, but she looked over her shoulder a little curious. "I don't really know what I'm doing here," she admitted. "This whole place, I'm just trying to keep it from falling apart." "That makes 2 of us," Tyler muttered under his breath, not expecting her to hear. But she did. The pump sat at the edge of a slope overlooking rows of untamed vines, stretching wide and wild, like a forgotten promise. Tyler crouched beside it, ran his hand over the rusted metal, and let out a low whistle. "You weren't kidding," he said. "She's seen better decades. Can you fix it?" "Maybe. Might need parts. She's jammed up good." "You got water coming in from the main line?" I think so." He looked up at her. "You new to this?" A pause. "Sort of," she said, dodging his gaze. "It belonged to my grandmother. I'm just staying here for now." Tyler nodded. He didn't press. Everyone was running from something. Some people just picked prettier places to hide. He worked for nearly 2 hours, swapping out valves, cleaning gunked-up lines, and coaxing the old machine back to life. Sophie stayed nearby, handing him tools when he asked, watching intently. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her questions were thoughtful, sharp in a way that suggested she wasn't just someone playing farmer. When the pump finally coughed and stuttered and came alive with a low, steady hum, she clapped once, then caught herself. "Thank you," she said, quieter now. "I didn't think it could be saved." Tyler stood, stretching his back. "Most things can be. Just takes patience and knowing where to look." She hesitated. "I don't have much cash on me today, but I do have something else if you'll take it." She disappeared into the house and returned with a bottle wrapped in brown paper. "It's from the cellar. I found a few crates in the barn. Vintage Carlton Estate." Tyler blinked. "Carlton? You're giving me a bottle of wine from one of the most expensive vineyards in California?" She tilted her head. "Is it?" He narrowed his eyes. "That name means something around here." "Not to me," she said too quickly. Tyler took the bottle but said nothing. Something about her wasn't adding up. Still, he smiled. "Well, thank you. And if anything else breaks, you know where to find me." Sophie offered a quiet smile. "I just might." As he drove away, the hum of the pump fading behind him, Tyler found himself glancing back in the mirror. The woman behind the fence was still standing there, one hand on her hip, eyes following him as if she wasn't quite ready to let the silence return. Neither was he. 2 days passed before Tyler Kane returned to 331 Fremont Road. He told himself it was to check the pump, to make sure the fix held, to see if the system needed calibration. That was what he told his son, too, when Ben asked why they were driving into the hills with a cooler of sandwiches and a jug of lemonade in the back seat. But deep down, Tyler knew the truth. He hadn't been able to get her out of his head. Not just the way she looked, though that lingered too, but the way she'd stood beside him in the dirt, sleeves rolled up, eyes narrowed in concentration. The way she seemed both fragile and fiercely guarded, like someone holding herself together with frayed string and sheer will. And that name, Carlton. She'd acted like it meant nothing. But in this part of California, it meant old money, legacy, and a vineyard empire once whispered about in wine circles. He told himself it was none of his business. But curiosity, like wild grapevine, had a way of creeping where it didn't belong. When they pulled up, the gate was open again. Sophie was in the same faded jeans and boots, standing on a ladder beneath an olive tree, pruning branches that had grown unruly. She looked over as the truck approached, her face momentarily unreadable, then relaxed into a small, genuine smile. "You came back," she said, hopping down. "Pump problems?" "Just wanted to make sure she's still humming," Tyler said, "and figured I'd bring some backup." Ben, 8 years old and full of questions, leapt from the passenger seat with the energy of a boy who'd spent too long around grown-ups in Greece. He made a beeline for a cluster of chickens pecking the edge of the yard. Sophie crouched to his level, unbothered by the dirt. "You like animals?" Ben nodded. "We don't have any, just a goldfish. My dad says we move too much for a dog." Sophie's eyes flicked to Tyler, softening. "Well, these girls are always happy to make new friends." She straightened, brushing soil from her knees. "Come on, I'll show you the vines." They walked past the old farmhouse, down a trail where the land sloped into rows of overgrown grapevines. Some were wild and tangled, others bare and dry. A few still bore clusters of dusty fruit, clinging to life in the autumn sun. "I've been trying to figure out what's salvageable," Sophie said, picking at a leaf. "Most of these haven't been tended in years." "You planning to bring it back?" Tyler asked. She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just here because I don't know where else to be." Ben had run ahead, chasing lizards between rows. Tyler watched him, then glanced at Sophie. "You ever work a vineyard before?" he asked. "No," she said too quickly, then added, "I mean, I've studied it, read about it. I used to visit this place as a kid, but being here, it's different." He noticed her dodge again, the slight hesitation before answering. It wasn't just modesty, it was something else, something carefully hidden. Tyler nodded slowly. "Well, vines are patient. You treat 'em right. They'll surprise you." Sophie looked at him then, her expression unreadable. "I'm not sure people work the same way." He opened his mouth to respond, but Ben interrupted, waving from the distance. "Dad, look, grapes!" Tyler excused himself and jogged over to Ben, who held a bunch of small, dark clusters. The boy beamed with pride. "They're real sweet," he said. "Want some?" Tyler took one and bit down. It wasn't bad, tart but promising. "These are survivors," he said, turning to Sophie. Not fancy, but they're trying. She smiled faintly. Like me. They shared lunch at a makeshift table near the pump. Sophie had laid out a blanket, and Tyler pulled the cooler from the truck. Ben talked nonstop about school, garage tools, comic books. Sophie listened with genuine attention, asking questions that made the boy light up. It struck Tyler then how easily she connected with his son. Not the overcompensating sweetness of someone trying too hard, but the quiet, natural presence of someone who knew how to listen. "You're good with kids," he said as they watched Ben chase chickens with a stick. "I've always liked them," Sophie replied. "They're honest. They ask questions adults are too afraid to." "Like what?" She thought for a second. "Why are you sad? Why are you alone?" Tyler fell silent. He picked at a blade of grass. "You don't strike me as someone who likes being alone." Sophie's voice dropped. "I didn't used to, but sometimes life makes that choice for you." Was the first time her walls cracked. Tyler didn't press. He knew grief, knew how it burrowed in and made a home of silence. Instead, he looked toward the pump house, then back to her. "If you ever need help with the vines, or anything else, I've got some free time on weekends." Sophie met his gaze, surprised. "Why would you offer that?" He shrugged. "Because I've had people help me when I didn't deserve it. And this place, it could be something again." She nodded, her eyes soft but cautious. "I'll think about it." When they drove off that afternoon, Ben fast asleep in the passenger seat, Sophie stood near the same fig trees, hands shading her eyes. Tyler didn't look back this time, but Sophie did. And for the first time in weeks, the vineyard didn't feel so empty. The headlines had been relentless. "Runaway heiress abandons $7 million wedding Carlton legacy in jeopardy as Sophie vanishes from vineyard royalty to radio silence." What happened to Sophie Carlton? They came like waves, flooding the internet, plastered across tabloids, even scrolling across financial news tickers. But Sophie had turned off every screen, pulled every plug, and driven west until the world fell quiet. Now, as twilight painted soft, lavender streaks across the California hills, she sat on the back porch of the farmhouse, legs curled beneath her, and watched the last of the sun drip behind the vines. Her fingers toyed with a chipped teacup, long gone cold. The quiet should have comforted her, but it never really did, not since that day. 3 weeks earlier, Sophie had stood in the bridal suite of the Rosemore estate, numb in a cloud of tulle and silk, while a stylist fussed with her hair and another adjusted the bodice of her custom French gown. Outside, a string quartet rehearsed beneath white-draped arbors. Champagne flowed like water, and guests from New York to Paris mingled with curated smiles. Everyone was watching. Everyone had a stake. The wedding was not just a union, it was a merger. Carlton Vineyards and Westvale Imports. Old world wine meets global distribution. Two legacies wrapped in white and gold. Sophie had agreed to it. She hadn't been forced. No one put a gun to her head. Her fiancé, Marcus, polished, handsome, a fifth-generation import mogul, had done everything by the book. Kind, composed, perfect on paper. But the paper never mentioned the quiet. The kind of quiet that crept in at night, when she lay beside him and stared at the ceiling, wondering when she'd stopped recognizing her own voice. The kind of quiet that echoed through every boardroom where she nodded instead of speaking, smiled instead of pushing back. Her mother had called it maturity. Her father had called it duty. But Sophie called it disappearing. And just an hour before the ceremony, she looked at herself in the mirror, lipstick flawless, eyes hollow, and asked the question no one else dared. Is this really my life? She didn't remember all the details, just that her hands were shaking when she left the ring on the nightstand, that her heart pounded as she slipped down a staff hallway in tennis shoes, the gown abandoned in a garment bag on the floor. She took nothing but her wallet, a duffel bag, and a set of keys her grandmother had given her years ago. Keys to the old house at 331 Fremont Road. It wasn't an escape, not really. It was a return. A return to the only place where no one expected anything of her. No stockholders, no press releases. Just soil, vines, and the memory of a woman who once told her, "The land remembers who loves it, and it forgives who stays." Her grandmother, Rose Carlton, had lived simply. A woman of discipline and dirt under the nails wisdom, who ran the vineyard with firm hands and a soft heart. She died just a year after Sophie finished business school, and the estate had quickly passed into the management of trustees who treated it like an antique. Valuable, yes, but inconvenient. No one had wanted the old house. Not the siblings, not the lawyers, not the board. But Sophie had. Not as a business, as a refuge. She set the cup down now and stood, brushing off her jeans. The vines stretched out before her like veins, tangled, neglected, still alive. And for the first time, she wasn't sure what scared her more, that the vineyard might fail, or that it might come back to life and ask her to stay. A faint sound broke the silence. Chickens rustling in their coop, a screen door creaking. She turned. No one there. Just the wind. Her thoughts drifted again, this time to Tyler. The way he looked at her, not with curiosity or calculation, but with the steady gaze of someone who didn't need the whole story to offer a hand. He didn't know who she was, didn't seem to care. He just saw someone who needed help, and that somehow unsettled her more than the headlines ever had. People had always wanted Sophie Carlton, the heiress, the brand, the opportunity. But Tyler Kane had offered kindness to a woman in dirty boots and sunburnt shoulders, and that kindness had cracked something open in her. Inside, she pulled a box from the closet and dug through old notebooks, maps, and yellowed crop reports. At the bottom, tucked beside a worn leather journal, she found the photo. Her and Rose, hands muddy, holding a cluster of grapes and grinning into the sun. Sophie smiled. She hadn't smiled like that in years. She turned the photo over. In Rose's spidery handwriting, "Life doesn't come with blueprints, sweetheart. It comes with seasons. Let the vines teach you." Sophie closed her eyes. The season had come, not one of harvest, but one of returning, of pruning what no longer served, of planting something new, maybe even of letting someone in. Tyler hadn't planned on showing up again that weekend. He told himself he had 1,000 things to do. Brake pads waiting at the shop, a leaky sink at Mrs. Delaney's, Ben's science project still half finished on the kitchen counter. But when Saturday morning rolled in, golden and warm with the scent of late-season sagebrush, he found himself tossing a toolbox into the bed of his truck and heading for Fremont Road. He hadn't called ahead, didn't even know if Sophie would be there. But something about that place, about her, kept tugging at him like a rope anchored deep in the soil. Sophie was kneeling by the base of a trellis, gloved hands deep in the dirt, when she heard the crunch of gravel beneath tires. She straightened, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, and shaded her eyes. Tyler stepped out, the morning sun catching the edge of his jaw, casting him in golden dust. "You brought tools," she said, arching a brow. "You mentioned wanting to rebuild the irrigation lines," he said casually. "Figured I'd lend a hand." She smiled, not quite able to hide the surprise in her eyes. "Hope you weren't expecting me to be handy," she said, gesturing to the mess of tangled hoses and rusted connectors behind her. "I've seen worse," he replied, crouching beside her. "A lot worse." For the next few hours, they worked side by side, knees in the dirt, hands blistered and stained. Tyler walked her through each step, how to clear clogs, patch cracks, realign the pressure valves. She listened carefully, occasionally making notes on a crumpled notepad. There was an ease between them now, fewer silences, more shared laughter. At one point, a burst of water shot sideways, soaking Tyler's shirt. Sophie gasped, then burst into laughter, her head thrown back, eyes shining. He grinned, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Guess I deserve that." "I didn't even touch it," she protested, still giggling. "The pump has a wicked sense of humor." "That's what happens when you try to wake up something that's been asleep too long," he said, not entirely joking. She paused, the laughter softening in her chest. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I know the feeling." They didn't speak for a moment, just the sound of distant birdsong and the wind moving through the vines. Tyler handed her a wrench. "Here, you finish this one." She hesitated. "What if I break it?" "Then we fix it." Sophie took the tool and crouched, carefully tightening the bolts. It wasn't perfect, but it held. She looked up at him, a bit proud. "Well, not bad for a city girl," he teased. She rolled her eyes. "I'm not a city girl." He studied her face, the stubborn smudge of dirt on her cheek, the way the sun lit the gold in her hair. "No," he said softly, "you're not." By noon, they'd repaired the main line to the lower vineyard. Tyler wiped his hands on his jeans and stretched, wincing. Sophie tilted her head. Hungry? He glanced toward the truck. Didn't pack lunch this time. I did, she said. Sort of. She led him to the back of the farmhouse where an old wooden table had been dragged into the shade. On it sat a mismatched spread. 2 chipped plates, fresh bread, sliced apples, goat cheese, and a bottle of water wrapped in a dish towel. I found this stuff at the farmer's market, she said, a little shy. Figured I should try making something with it. He sat. Looks better than anything I've eaten this week. They ate quietly at first, the way people do when food is too good for talk. Eventually their conversation drifted, from small things like favorite books and terrible weather to deeper currents. Sophie told him about her grandmother's notebooks, the ones she was studying to learn the rhythms of the land. Tyler told her about his father, a steel worker who believed in hard hands and quiet faith. I think he would have liked this place, Tyler said. Said the best kind of people are the ones who know how to stay put. Sophie was silent for a moment. I've never been good at staying put. Maybe you just haven't found the right place. She looked at him, something flickering in her eyes. And what about you? Ever think about leaving this town? Used to, he admitted, back when I thought there was something better out there. And now? He looked past her, to the hills glowing in the afternoon light. Now I think, maybe better isn't somewhere else. Maybe it's someone else. Her breath caught, just slightly, but before she could respond, the sound of footsteps interrupted them. Ben came bounding around the corner, holding a crumpled drawing. Dad, look what I made for Miss Sophie. He held up a pencil sketch. Grapevines under a sunset, a little house, and 3 stick figures. A man, a woman, and a boy. Sophie knelt to examine it. This is beautiful, Ben. Is that us? He nodded eagerly. I made it while you were fixing pipes. You should hang it on your fridge. She smiled, and for a brief second, emotion flickered behind her eyes, something close to longing. She ruffled his hair. I just might, she whispered. Later, as Tyler packed up, Sophie walked him to the truck. Thanks for coming, she said. You're welcome. I mean it, she said, meeting his gaze. You didn't have to. He shrugged. Most things worth doing don't come with a have to. She looked down, toying with the hem of her sleeve. I'm not great at this. Letting people in. I know. But I want to try. He nodded. Good, I'll be here. She stepped back as he turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. But before he pulled away, he leaned out the window. Sophie? Yeah. That lunch? He smiled. You're definitely not just trying. She laughed, and the sound followed him down the road like a warm wind through the vines. The whispers started at Hattie's Diner, like most things did in Calverton. Tyler didn't hear them at first. He was too busy rebuilding a transmission for a neighbor's rusted pickup and helping Ben rehearse a diorama presentation about the gold rush. But the hum of small-town rumor, once set loose, moved like wildfire through dry summer grass. It began with a photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but recognizable. Tyler and Sophie standing under the arbor of the vineyard, laughing, his sleeve rolled to the elbow, her face turned toward him, sun-dappled and unguarded. Ben could be seen in the background, chasing chickens. The caption was simple. Looks like someone's back in town, and not just for the grapes. It had been posted anonymously on a local blog that specialized in nostalgia and neighborly gossip. Most of the time it was harmless. A lost dog, a recipe swap, debate over who made the best peach cobbler at the harvest fair. But not this time, because people in Calverton remembered the Carltons. They remembered the grandeur of the vineyard, the high society galas, the scandals when the estate faltered. And they remembered Sophie, though only as the picture-perfect daughter who left and didn't look back. Now she had returned, not as an heiress, but as a mystery. And in towns like Calverton, mystery never went quietly. Tyler first caught wind of it at a gas station. He was topping off his truck when he noticed an older man, Bill Stroud, retired postmaster, giving him a look that lingered too long. Mornin', Tyler offered. Bill raised an eyebrow. Didn't know you were moonlighting as a vineyard hand? Tyler blinked. Excuse me? Bill pulled out his phone, showed him the blog post. Tyler's stomach dipped. Where'd you get this? It's been making the rounds. Folks are wondering if the Carlton girl's planning to sell the place or revive it. And if you're involved. Tyler forced a tight smile. I'm just helping out with a few repairs. Bill nodded, but his tone turned sharper. Just be careful, son. Some people come back for closure. Others come back to stir things up. Tyler didn't answer. He drove off, blood buzzing in his ears. Later that day at the garage, Tyler found Sophie waiting for him. She stood by the workbench, arms crossed, holding her phone. Her expression was taut, shoulders square, chin lifted, but there was something in her eyes that looked like betrayal. You've seen it, she said. I have. I didn't know someone was watching us, she added quickly. I swear, I didn't. I know, he interrupted gently. I believe you. That seemed to soften her, but only slightly. They know who I am now, she said, voice lowering. Not just the town, everyone. That blog is already syndicated. It'll go national by morning. Tyler wiped his hands on a rag. What do you want to do? I don't know, she whispered. I thought I could just live quietly, reclaim the land, be anonymous, but I should have known better. She looked at him then, really looked, and the wall between them grew taller in an instant. You're part of this now, she said, guilt lining her voice, and I never meant to drag you into it. You didn't, Tyler said firmly. I walked in willingly. I wasn't honest with you, Tyler. No, he agreed. You weren't. She winced. He took a step closer. But I think I understand why. Her voice cracked. Do you? You were trying to protect something that mattered to you. Maybe even yourself. That doesn't make you a liar. It makes you human. Sophie blinked fast, her throat working around words she didn't know how to say. But you do need to decide, Tyler continued. What comes next? Because this town doesn't let go easy. And if you want to stay, it's not just about hiding anymore. Sophie looked down, then nodded slowly. I'll figure it out, she said, but her voice was far from certain. That night, Sophie sat alone in the farmhouse with her grandmother's journals spread across the table. The words blurred beneath her eyes. The vines don't need perfection, Rose had once written. They need presence. She felt like a ghost among roots that remembered better hands. Her illusions of control had vanished like dew under sun. The town had seen her, and now the walls she'd built felt more like glass than stone. She reached for her phone and hesitated, then dialed. When the line picked up, her mother's voice came sharp and cool. So, Meredith Carlton said, I assume you've seen the headlines. Sophie inhaled. I didn't plan for this. No, but you never do you? You run. That's your plan. I didn't call to argue. No? Why did you call? Sophie paused. To say I'm staying. There was silence on the other end. Staying where? Her mother asked. At the vineyard. Another pause, then a cold laugh. That place is rotting, Sophie. It's a monument to stubbornness. No, Sophie said, her voice steadying. It's a monument to legacy, and I'm not walking away from it again. Her mother didn't reply, and Sophie didn't wait for her to. She ended the call, breathing hard. Then she sat back, staring at the ceiling. The silence, once oppressive, now wrapped around her like a quilt. A few miles away, Tyler sat on his porch with a cup of coffee. Ben asleep upstairs. He scrolled past the headlines and turned off the screen. He'd seen enough noise. Now he just wanted the truth. And the woman behind the fence? She was worth hearing out. The morning air tasted different, cooler, sharper, as if the vineyard had exhaled something heavy during the night. Sophie stood at the edge of the lower field, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the rows of vines newly cleared and patched. Tyler's work had been meticulous, efficient but never rushed. The kind of care that only came from someone who saw value in what others left behind. Just like he saw her, or at least the version of her she'd let him see. And that was the problem now, wasn't it? He hadn't fallen for Sophie Carlton. He'd come to trust the woman behind the name. The woman who patched hoses with shaking hands and burned bread in the oven. The woman who laughed with his son and cried silently into her pillow after reading old letters she couldn't throw away. But the real Sophie? She wasn't just the woman in boots and jeans. She was the face on magazine covers, the daughter of Meredith Carlton, the runaway bride who'd made a $7 million wedding disappear in a single night. And today she had to tell him. Because it wasn't just about Tyler anymore. It was about earning back the land she'd abandoned, in the trust she wasn't sure she deserved. Tyler arrived around 10, as promised. His truck kicked up a soft cloud of dust as it rolled to a stop under the fig trees. He stepped out with a smile, toolbox in hand. "Morning," he said. Sophie forced a smile in return. "Thanks for coming." "You're lucky. I almost picked pancakes and football over vineyard duty." She tried to smile again. Failed. Tyler narrowed his eyes. "What's going on?" "Can we talk?" she asked. He set the box down slowly. "That sounds serious." "It is." She led him behind the barn to the side of the hill where the vines had thinned and the soil was bare. It felt more open here, less suffocating. Maybe that was why she chose it. No walls, no shadows, just truth. Sophie turned to face him. "There's something I need to tell you. About me. About this place." Tyler didn't speak. He waited, steady, like he always was. She took a breath. "My full name is Sophie Carlton." His face didn't change. She continued. "I'm the only daughter of Meredith and James Carlton. I'm the legal heir to Carlton Vineyards." Now the reaction came. Subtle, but undeniable. His jaw tightened. His shoulders drew back, not in anger, but in defense, like a man bracing for a blow he didn't know was coming. "I know you've probably guessed parts of it," she said. "The wine bottle, the land. But I haven't been honest. I let you believe I was just someone trying to figure things out." "You were," he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "You are someone trying to figure things out. That part wasn't a lie." Sophie's breath hitched. "But I should have told you sooner. I didn't mean to deceive you. After everything that happened, I needed to disappear. I didn't come here to manipulate anyone. I came to remember who I was when no one was watching." "And what happened?" Tyler asked. "What made you run?" Sophie swallowed. "I was supposed to get married. Marcus Langford. Maybe you've heard the name." Tyler nodded. "Imports, New York." "Yeah," she said, a trace of bitterness in her voice. "We were perfect on paper. Carlton and Langford. Merger of two dynasties. My mother called it a power move. My father called it destiny." "And you?" Tyler asked. "I called it wrong." She paused, then added, "I left the morning of the wedding. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked out." Tyler was quiet for a long time. Too long. Sophie stepped closer. "I understand if you're angry, if you don't want to be part of this anymore." He met her gaze then, his voice low. "I'm not angry." She exhaled, relief, but it was short-lived. "I'm disappointed," he added. "Not because of your name, or your past, but because you didn't trust me enough to tell me sooner." The words landed softly, but they cut deep. "I didn't know how," she admitted. "I wasn't sure you'd still see me the same." Tyler shook his head. "Sophie, I've worked with all kinds of people. Some who wore $1,000 suits, some who didn't have 2 dimes to rub together. But trust? That's not about income. It's about truth." She bit her lip. "So? What now?" "I need some time," he said. "This isn't nothing, and I have a son to think about. He likes you, I like you, but we've been here before. Me, trusting too fast." The pain in her chest was sharp but deserved. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I believe you," he said. "But believing someone and trusting them? 2 different things." That night, Tyler stood at his kitchen sink, staring out the window as Ben colored at the table. "She looks scared," the boy said suddenly. Tyler turned. "Who?" "Sophie. Today. When you left." Tyler didn't answer right away. Ben set down his crayon. "Did she do something bad?" "No," Tyler said. "She just didn't know how to be honest yet." "Are you going to stop going to the vineyard?" "I don't know." Ben frowned. "I hope not. I like it there." Tyler nodded slowly. So did he. Back at the farmhouse, Sophie sat on the floor beside a half-unpacked box of old letters. Her hands trembled as she unfolded a note her grandmother had written before she passed. "Forgiveness isn't a transaction, sweetheart. It's a practice. Just like pruning a vine, cutting what hurts to give room for new growth." She pressed the letter to her chest, closed her eyes. Tyler hadn't shut the door, but he'd stepped back. Now it was up to her to earn his return, Not with charm, but with roots. The vineyard was quiet, not just the usual stillness of rural California in late afternoon, but the kind of silence that feels earned, like the land was holding its breath along with her. Sophie sat on the back steps of the farmhouse, her boots dusty, her hands streaked with soil and grease from a morning spent alone fixing drip lines that probably didn't even need fixing. She wasn't working for progress. She was working to stay busy. Since Tyler left 3 days ago, she hadn't seen him. No texts, no calls, no soft rumble of his truck down the gravel path. The silence stretched long and unforgiving, like a fence she didn't know how to climb. But he hadn't slammed the gate either, and that mattered. Still, every time she heard an engine in the distance, or a door slammed 2 fields over, her stomach twisted with hope she wasn't ready to admit. Inside, she shuffled through more of her grandmother's old paperwork, crop rotation notes, rainfall logs, receipts for barrels from Napa cooperatives. Tucked into one folder was a map of the vineyard from decades earlier, carefully labeled in Rose Carlton's spidery hand. Block A, Petit Syrah. Block B, Zinfandel Block. C, Reserved. Ben's Rose. Sophie paused. She didn't remember an employee named Ben. She traced the lines with her finger, noting the years, 1995-2000. Then it clicked. Rose used to sponsor at-risk teens from the nearby county youth program. One of them, a quiet, polite boy named Ben, had worked summers here, and Rose always treated him like family. She once said the boy reminded her that some vines just need better soil. Sophie sat back, heart tightening. She realized, not for the first time, that she was standing on a legacy much larger than money or a last name. It wasn't just wine. It was work, redemption, belonging. She walked outside, past the lower fields, and into Block C. The vines there were surprisingly strong, still bearing fruit, still reaching for light. That night she watered every row by hand. Across town, Tyler was no less restless. He moved through his small kitchen making dinner he didn't feel like eating, while Ben hummed from the living room, working on another drawing. Tyler's mind kept going back to Sophie, the way she had stood there, telling him the truth with no makeup, no defense, no spin. Just her. Shaken, yes, but brave. And he'd pulled back. He told himself it was for Ben's sake. He didn't want his son getting attached to someone who might vanish the way too many people had. But deep down, Tyler knew that wasn't the whole truth. He was scared, not of who Sophie was, but of what she made him feel, of how quickly she had slipped past his defenses, and of how, despite everything, he still wanted to drive up that hill and say, "Let's try again." "Dad?" Tyler blinked, turning to Ben. The boy held up a new sketch. It was the vineyard again, but this time the house had flowers around it, and the stick figure of Sophie wore a sun hat. Tyler and Ben were beside her, smiling. "This one's for her," Ben said, "in case she's sad." Tyler swallowed hard. "Do you think she'll come back?" Ben asked. Tyler looked at the drawing, then out the window. "I think she already did." The next morning, Tyler dropped Ben off at school, then sat in his truck for a long while, fingers tapping the steering wheel. He thought about all the people who'd let him down, clients who never paid, friends who disappeared when the bill stacked too high, a wife who got sick too young and left a silence he hadn't filled in years. But Sophie hadn't walked away. She'd told the truth, even knowing it might cost her everything. And maybe that was enough. He started the engine. Sophie didn't hear his truck at first. She was bent over the grate press, trying to repair a leaky valve, when the sound of footsteps on gravel made her freeze. She turned slowly, heart in her throat. Tyler stood there, hands in his pockets. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he lifted a small, rolled-up paper from his jacket pocket and walked toward her. "Ben made this," he said, handing it over. She unrolled the sketch, her hand trembling. The farmhouse, the vines, the three of them, together. Tears welled in her eyes. Tyler looked at her, voice low. "You said you didn't know how to be honest, but you figured it out." She nodded, unable to speak. "I don't care about your last name," he continued. "I care that you show up, that you try, that you want to build something real." "I do," she whispered. "Good." He offered a small, crooked smile. "Because I was thinking, Maybe we could fix the irrigation on Block C together. I heard the vines out there are survivors. Sophie let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, they are. She stepped forward, close enough to smell the faint scent of engine grease and sun on his shirt. Tyler, she said softly, I can't promise I'll always get this right. I'm still learning. He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. So am I. And for the first time in years, the vineyard didn't feel like a place she was hiding. It felt like home. The first time Sophie spoke at a town meeting, her voice trembled so hard she gripped the podium to steady herself. She hadn't planned to speak at all, but the moment came unexpectedly when the mayor invited public comments and eyes turned toward her like vines bending toward sunlight. Some were curious, others suspicious, a few openly doubtful. She stood anyway. My name is Sophie Carlton, she began, her voice quieter than she wanted it to be. And yes, I am that Carlton. A small ripple of chuckles and murmurs broke the silence, but she didn't flinch. I left this town years ago thinking I knew what legacy meant. I thought it was about wealth, names, what you build on paper. But I came back to find that real legacy is what you build with your hands and who you build it with. A pause. I'm not here to reclaim a title. I'm here to rebuild a vineyard, not just for profit, but for purpose. She took a breath and glanced down at the note in her hand, then let it drop. I want to turn part of the Carlton estate into a community vineyard, one that supports local workers, one that gives back, one that belongs to all of us, not just a name on a label. The room was quiet, and then applause. Not thunderous, not immediate, but real, earnest, a start. By the following week, Sophie had press clippings stacked beside her grandmother's journals and 3 voicemails from regional reporters. But she ignored them all. What mattered more were the 2 high school seniors who showed up asking to help after school. The retired horticulture professor who dropped off a stack of vineyard planning books, and the local bakery that offered to donate loaves for her first volunteer workday. She also noticed something else. People stopped whispering about her. They started waving. At the grocery store, the gas station, even church, where she had returned for the first time in nearly a decade. The town wasn't quick to forget, but it was willing to forgive, especially when she showed up again and again, with dirt under her fingernails and sincerity in her eyes. Tyler helped when he could, weekends, evenings after Ben went to bed, sometimes just to fix equipment, sometimes just to walk the rows beside her in silence. They didn't rush anything. Neither of them had space in their lives for fragile illusions. But with each passing day, Sophie began to understand what it meant to be rooted, not in a place, but in the presence of someone who stayed. She also began to see the land differently. Where she once saw broken trellises and dying vines, she now saw possibility, places where new rows could grow, where wildflowers could be planted to draw pollinators, where walking paths could be carved for visitors and volunteers. Block C, once the forgotten plot, became the heart of her plan. She named it Ben's Rose, in quiet tribute to both her grandmother's legacy and the boy who had brought color back into her world through crayon drawings and wide-eyed honesty. One evening, while Sophie was sketching a layout plan on the porch, Tyler arrived carrying a crate of old wooden signs. I figured these might come in handy, he said, setting them down beside her. She smiled, brushing back a lock of hair. You always show up with something useful. Years of fixing junk will teach you to keep things people throw away. She looked up at him, her voice soft. That's what you thought I was, isn't it? Junk someone else left behind? He met her gaze. No, I thought you were something valuable. That didn't know it yet. She swallowed, touched, then reached into the crate and pulled out a sign with faded lettering that once read, Tasting Room. Think we'll ever reopen that? She asked. If anyone can do it, he said, it's you. Their eyes lingered for a moment too long, until the sound of Ben's laughter from inside the house broke the spell. He was watching cartoons, his feet dangling off the couch, his half-finished drawing forgotten beside him. Sophie smiled. He feels at home here. So do I, Tyler said. By late September, the vines began to turn. Golden at first, then burnt orange, with just a hint of crimson where the sun lingered longest. Harvest was still weeks away for the few surviving fruit clusters, but the land was breathing again, moving, preparing. And so was Sophie. She filed paperwork to register the Second Harvest Vineyard, a name that embodied what this place had become for her. Not a rebirth, not a start over, a second chance. Not long after, she stood once again before the townspeople. Not at a podium, but under a string of soft lights, beside a table filled with local cheeses, breads, and glasses of the last vintage produced under her grandmother's care. Tyler stood beside her. Ben ran between guests with a plastic tray of homemade cookies. Sophie lifted a glass. "Tonight," she said, "we don't toast to what was lost. We toast to what can still be found. In the soil, in each other, and in the unexpected ways we grow." The clinking of glasses echoed through the vineyard like wind through leaves. And for the first time, Sophie didn't feel like a stranger in her own name. She felt like someone worth knowing, on her own terms. They came in twos and threes, old-timers in flannel, teenagers in dusty sneakers, women with sun hats and warm casseroles, a retired Marine with a prosthetic leg and a toolbox bigger than Tyler's. Even Pastor Harris, who rarely ventured beyond the church steps, rolled up his sleeves and hauled wheelbarrows like a man half his age. It wasn't the gala Sophie's mother would have planned. It was better. It was the first volunteer day at the Second Harvest Vineyard, and by mid-morning the rows of vines were buzzing with life. Not just the hum of bees and the clink of tools, but voices, stories, laughter. People who once looked at Sophie Carlton with suspicion now waved as if they'd known her all along. Sophie stood at the top of the slope, clipboard in hand, taking it all in with a stunned kind of awe. "You okay?" Tyler's voice came from behind her, low and warm. She turned, smiling. "I'm overwhelmed, honestly." He nodded. "Good kind or bad kind?" "The kind that feels like grace," she said, eyes shining. Tyler looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked. Ben made a sign. "Thought you might want to hang it somewhere." She unfolded the drawing. Crayon letters, crooked and charming, spelled out, "This place makes good things grow." Below it, 3 stick figures stood under a giant vine. One tall, one medium, one small. Sophie blinked rapidly. "He's something else," Tyler chuckled. "He's got more heart than most grown men I know." She folded the paper gently, held it close. "So does his dad." Their eyes met, and this time neither looked away. Later that afternoon, after the last row had been weeded and the final shovel set down, Sophie brought out lemonade and cookies, and everyone gathered under the arbor to rest. The conversations drifted. Talk of local harvest fairs, chili cook-offs, high school football. Someone brought out a guitar. Someone else sang. It wasn't polished, it wasn't planned, but it was real. And for the first time in years, Sophie felt herself truly exhale. She caught Tyler's gaze across the gathering. He tilted his head slightly toward the field. She nodded. They slipped away quietly, walking down the worn path toward Block C. The sun had begun its descent, casting gold across the vineyard. The air was still, save for the occasional chirp of a distant bird and the soft crunch of their boots on the dirt. "Do you ever think," Sophie said after a moment, "about how fragile this all is?" Tyler glanced at her. "This place, this peace, it's like it could blow away in a single bad wind." He paused. "You mean like a scandal? Or a market crash?" She shook her head. "No, I mean life. Just life. One diagnosis, one wrong turn, one person leaving." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think about that. And I don't let it stop me from planting the next row." They walked a few steps more before Sophie stopped. "Tyler," she said, turning to face him, "there's something I haven't said. Not really, not out loud." He waited. "I came back here because I was lost, and I thought if I could disappear into this place, maybe I'd stop feeling so hollow. But it wasn't the land that saved me. It was you, and Ben, and this town, and the work, and—" She hesitated, then exhaled. "I don't want to build this alone." Tyler stepped closer, close enough for her to see the tiny flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "You're not alone," he said simply. Then without fanfare or hesitation, he reached for her hand. Their fingers laced together, naturally, as if they'd been made for that, as if all the distance they'd traveled, emotionally, physically, spiritually, had led to this moment. She smiled. "You're really not afraid, are you?" He tilted his head. "Of what?" "Of loving someone who's still learning how to stay." Tyler's expression turned serious. "No," he said. "I'm more afraid of letting her go before she realizes she can." That evening, the town buzzed quietly about what they had seen. Sophie Carlton and Tyler Kane walking back up the vineyard path hand in hand. No announcements, no big declarations, just a steady, simple return. At the bakery the next morning, someone said, "About time." At the hardware store, someone else said, "Did you see the way he looked at her?" And at the church, Pastor Harris smiled and whispered to his wife, "I think that vineyard finally found its roots again." She patted his hand. "No, dear, they did." At the farmhouse, Sophie pinned Ben's drawing beside the kitchen door. She stared at it a long time, 3 figures beneath a vine, and added a fourth, a dog, just a doodle, a promise. Then she stepped out onto the porch where Tyler waited, coffee in one hand and plans for a new irrigation grid in the other. She looked at the map, then at the sky. "Let's plant something new," she said. He smiled. "Let's." There's a quiet kind of satisfaction in digging into the earth. Not the flashy, romantic kind they show in movies. No swirls of golden light or orchestras in the background. Just the rhythmic scrape of shovel against soil, the occasional grunt when a stubborn root won't let go, and the way your back aches at the end of the day in a way that feels right. It was how Sophie spent her mornings now, and Tyler was always there beside her. They didn't talk much while they worked. They didn't need to. Their communication had become its own language. Small nods, half smiles, the passing of tools without needing to ask. It was the kind of comfort that came from showing up day after day, choosing presence over performance. Sophie marked the final row in Block C with a stake, tying it with twine as Tyler adjusted the line of the irrigation hose. "That's the last of it," she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. Tyler stood, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "You know, for someone who used to wear designer heels, you're not bad with a shovel." She grinned. "My grandmother used to say, 'You can't drink wine from a field you won't touch.'" "Smart woman," he said. "You take after her." Sophie paused, her smile fading into something softer. "I'm trying." He looked at her, eyes kind. "You're doing." That afternoon, Sophie gathered a group of the vineyard's new volunteers under the shade of the arbor. Mostly seniors, young adults, and parents with kids who just needed a place to be. She spoke briefly, sharing plans for the community grafting project, where locals could sponsor individual vines, learn to tend them, and eventually bottle small batch wine with their names on the label. It was part business, part outreach, but mostly it was personal. "I want this land to give back the way it gave to me," she said. "Not just grapes, but healing, opportunity, belonging." The crowd clapped. A few wiped tears. Tyler, standing near the back, watched her with quiet pride. Not because she spoke eloquently, though she did, but because she wasn't hiding anymore. In the days that followed, Sophie worked alongside everyone. She didn't supervise from the porch. She knelt in the dirt, bandaged blisters, showed the teenagers how to trellis vines, and the retirees how to identify mildew. She laughed when someone tripped into a sprinkler. She cried quietly, the first time someone referred to the vineyard as ours. One morning, a woman arrived unannounced. She stepped from a black SUV, heels crunching gravel, her tailored linen coat spotless in the dust. Meredith Carlton. Sophie stiffened, brushing dirt from her knees as her mother approached. "I read about the project," Meredith said, not offering a hug. "It seems ambitious." "It's working," Sophie replied. Meredith looked past her, toward the fields where vines stretched confidently toward a sky they had once feared. "I always thought you'd outgrow this place," Meredith said, "not try to resurrect it." "I'm not resurrecting anything," Sophie said calmly. "I'm finally living it." Her mother studied her, long and hard. "Is that man part of this?" "Yes." Meredith's lip curled slightly. "He's not from our circle." "No," Sophie said. "He's better." Silence. Then Meredith's eyes drifted to Ben, who was helping hammer a new wooden sign into the ground. His laughter echoed, bright and full. "He seems happy," Meredith said, softer now. "He is." "And you?" Sophie looked at the rose. At Tyler's figure in the distance, shirt sleeves rolled, sun in his hair. At the people gathered not for profit or prestige, but because they believed in something being built with love. "I'm home, Mother," Sophie said. Meredith nodded once. "Then I won't stand in your way." It wasn't a blessing, but it was a beginning. That evening, Sophie stood alone in the vineyard as the sky melted into watercolor. Tyler joined her quietly, handing her a cup of coffee. "How'd it go?" he asked. "She came. She saw. She disapproved." Sophie smirked. "Then she left." He chuckled. "Progress." Sophie sipped the coffee, savoring its warmth. "She may never understand, but that's okay. I'm not doing this for her." "No," Tyler said. "You're doing it for you. And for them." "You're right." He nodded toward the volunteers cleaning up tools, waving as they passed. "And for us," he added. Sophie's eyes met his. "Is that what we are now?" He stepped closer. "I'd like to think so." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stood that way a long while, watching the last light touch the vines. It was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was peace. The vineyard woke early that morning. Even before the sun rose, headlights lit up the dusty road to Fremont Road. Trucks rolled in, engines purring softly like animals waiting to be fed. People emerged in flannel shirts and faded jeans, gloves tucked in pockets, coffee cups steaming in their hands. It was harvest day, the first in more than a decade. Sophie stood near the top of the hill, wearing her grandmother's old straw hat and holding a clipboard smudged with notes and assignments. Her boots were caked with dirt, her shoulders sore from days of preparation, but her heart beat steady, grounded. This was what she came back for. Not the glamour, not the headlines, but this, the quiet joy of purpose, shared hands on the land, and the way the air carried something sacred when a community moved as one. Tyler joined her at her side, mug in hand. "They're all here," he said. She glanced down at the rows below. "It's more than I expected." He smiled. "It always is when you do it right." She nodded, eyes shining. "Let's do it." By mid-morning, the vines echoed with life. Children ran between rows with baskets. Teenagers clipped clusters under the guidance of retirees, and the scent of crushed grapes rose like incense. The community had become a machine of movement, fluid, joyful, a living symphony of effort and laughter. At the heart of it all, Sophie moved between groups with quiet assurance, checking temperatures, tasting ripeness, offering encouragement. She carried a small satchel across her chest with Rose Carlton's handwritten harvest notes inside, worn soft at the edges. Ben, wearing an oversized straw hat of his own, followed Tyler like a shadow, offering water bottles and asking 1,000 questions per hour. "How do you know when the grapes are ready? Why do some look dusty? Can we make purple juice instead of wine?" Tyler chuckled, ruffling his hair. "One question at a time, partner." Sophie caught sight of them from across the rows and smiled to herself. She never could have planned this, and yet it felt like everything had unfolded exactly as it should. By noon, the harvest was complete. The final crates were stacked in the shade, full and fragrant, ready to be pressed. Sophie gathered the group under the arbor, where tables had been laid with food. Pasta salad, roast chicken, cornbread, pies, and bottles of lemonade that shimmered like liquid sunlight. She stood on a small wooden crate, lifted a glass, and waited for the murmurs to quiet. "I was 13 the last time this land saw a harvest," she began. "I remember my grandmother holding up a single cluster of grapes and saying, 'It's not the fruit that matters most. It's the hands that brought it here.'" She paused, looking over the sea of familiar and new faces. "Today, those hands are yours. This vineyard was asleep for a long time. So was I. And it was your kindness, your time, your belief that brought us both back." She turned to a covered table beside her and pulled back the cloth, revealing dark glass bottles, clean, simple, unmarked except for a label that read, "The Second Harvest, Block C, Vintage, this year." "The first small batch," she said. "We bottled them quietly last week, from the earliest vines. A thank you, a symbol, a beginning." She lifted one bottle and held it up. "This isn't just wine. It's proof that second chances are worth the work." Applause filled the space like summer wind through leaves. Some clapped with both hands. Others wiped at their eyes first. Tyler stepped beside her, slid an arm around her waist. "You ready for what comes next?" he asked quietly. Sophie leaned into him. "I already have it." Later that evening, after the tables had been cleared and the guests had gone, Sophie found herself sitting on the back steps of the farmhouse, barefoot, a glass of their new wine in her hand. It was rich, subtle, a little rough around the edges, just like her. Tyler joined her without a word, settling beside her with a sigh. "I think my shoulders forgot what a full day's work feels like," he said. She smiled. "They'll remember again tomorrow." They sat for a while in comfortable silence, watching the sky change. Deep blues melting into gold, then lavender, then quiet black. A few lanterns still glowed across the rows. Sophie turned to him. "You ever think about how strange it is that this all came from a broken pump?" Tyler chuckled. "You say strange. I say divine." She took another sip. "Would you have come if I hadn't called that day?" "I don't know," he said truthfully. "I was getting pretty good at staying in my own quiet little world." She looked at him, voice gentle. "You still want that world?" He turned toward her, eyes steady. "Not since the day I saw you in it." She set down her glass, her hand finding his. "I want to build something with you, Tyler. Not just this vineyard. A life, a family, whatever that means now." His hand closed around hers. "We already started." A door creaked behind them. Ben poked his head out, hair tousled, clutching a book. "Can I read on the porch with you?" Sophie smiled. "Always." The boy crawled between them, curling against Sophie's side, opening his book to a page about stars and seeds, and what they both needed to grow. Sophie rested her head on Tyler's shoulder. The three of them sat together, surrounded by the vineyard that had once been broken, now alive with promise. And above them, the first stars began to bloom. The fence had stood for decades, a long, weather-worn barrier of wood and wire that stretched along the north end of the vineyard. It wasn't much to look at, half of it leaning, the posts gray with time. But it had marked the line between what was ours and what was theirs for as long as anyone in town could remember. Rose Carlton had kept it up more out of habit than necessity. "Some lines," she once told Sophie, "keep us safe. Others just keep us apart." Sophie never forgot that. And now on the first warm morning of spring, a full year since she'd returned to Fremont Road with nothing but a duffel bag and the weight of a name she hadn't known how to carry, she stood before that fence with Tyler, a crowbar in hand and resolve in her chest. "You sure?" he asked, glancing at the old boards. She nodded. "It's time." Together they began pulling it down, plank by plank, nail by stubborn nail. Dust floated in the air. A few birds startled from the posts. The rhythm of effort felt almost ceremonial, like they weren't just tearing something down, but honoring what once was by letting it go. When the last post hit the ground, Sophie stepped back, wiping her brow. Her shirt clung to her back, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. From where they stood, the view stretched beyond the rows of Block C and out toward the open hills, untouched land, waiting. No more division, no more hiding, just sky and possibility. The new tasting room opened that weekend. Not a grand affair, just a hand-painted sign that read Second Harvest Tasting Room, strung between two reclaimed barrels. Inside, wood beams reclaimed from the old barn gave the space warmth. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, catching the dust in golden shafts. Strings of soft lights crisscrossed the ceiling, and the scent of oak and crushed fruit hung in the air like a promise. People came not just for the wine, but for what it represented. A second chance, a new beginning. Something born not out of prestige or profit, but of roots and resilience. Sophie poured the first glass herself. She wore a simple cotton dress and her grandmother's locket. Behind the bar, Tyler wiped down glasses while Ben arranged crackers on a tray with the careful precision of a boy who took pride in small things. As the first guest walked in, neighbors, friends, people who once watched her from behind curtains and now embraced her with genuine warmth, Sophie felt no fear, only gratitude. Later that evening, when the crowd had thinned and the laughter settled into hums and slow music, Tyler took Sophie's hand and led her outside. They walked past the rows, now leafing bright green with spring, past the last of the tool sheds and into the clearing where the fence once stood. There, under a new arbor Tyler had built by hand, stood a long wooden bench. On it, carved carefully into the backrest, were 4 simple words: love, labor, land, legacy. Sophie ran her fingers over the grooves. "It's perfect," she whispered. "It's yours," he said. "Ours." They sat, shoulders brushing, silence stretching warm between them. After a moment, she leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think I had to become someone else to be loved, to be chosen." "You don't have to be anyone but you," he murmured. "You were always enough." She closed her eyes. Let the words sink deep like rain into soil. "I want to grow old here," she said softly. "With you, with Ben, with vines and sun and chickens and too many weeds." Tyler chuckled. "I can handle the weeds." "I know," she said, smiling. "You always could." That night, after Ben had fallen asleep on the couch with grape juice on his shirt and grass in his hair, Sophie stood at the kitchen window, looking out into the dark vineyard. The stars were bright, the vines were quiet, and for the first time in her adult life, she wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. There would still be storms. There would still be droughts and disappointments, and maybe even days when fear crept in. But now she knew what to do when things broke. You fix them. With your hands, with your heart, with the people who stay. She turned toward the table, where a bottle of Second Harvest, Block C, sat uncorked, 2 glasses half full. She picked up the label, handwritten, slightly crooked, and smiled. It wasn't perfect. It was honest. And that was enough. The next morning, as the town woke to bird song and promise, a new sign appeared at the entrance to the property. Simple, wooden, painted in white. The woman behind the fence beneath it, in smaller script. You never know what's growing in someone until you step close enough to help them bloom. And just beyond the gate, under the arch of budding vines, stood Sophie and Tyler, waiting, welcoming, home. Now I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I'm always amazed by how stories like this can bring people together from all around the world. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more stories about kindness, love, and second chances. Your support helps me keep sharing these moments that remind us all of what truly matters. And if you've ever had a small act of kindness change your life, or someone else's, I'd love to read your story in the comments. Thank you so much for spending time here today. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and keep believing in the beauty of unexpected beginnings.